And now joining me in studio to make sense of this impasse and the best way out of this situation is Spring Rock Energy Country Manager Ogutu Okudo. Thank you very much indeed for joining us once again.
Thank you, Patrick.
I
never expected to be back this soon.
Yeah.
However, I'm obliged to be here.
Here you are. And when we had you last time, close to a month and a half ago, you indicated that we might see things like this happening. What is it that actually prompted you to come up with that thought, unrest, and perhaps even the kind of a situation that we are having in Turkana?
Well, Patrick, you know, prior to the early oil pilot scheme taking off, there was a bit of hesitation from the local community. There was a bit of a drag out regarding getting their buy-in.
Yeah.
And we saw this happen just a few days to the launching of the early oil pilot scheme. And that brought a lot into question. Was there an environmental social impact assessment taken out? And was this done adequately? And without being able to see that, it was very obvious that this was just an impending disaster or an impending uproar about to happen. And when we now see local Turkana residents in uproar saying that they want to be able to see where the money is going, they want this money in their local bank accounts as well, it gives us a clear indication that proper hindsight and proper litigation on the ground was not taken care of. And it is very disappointing. Hence why I kept emphasizing we must manage the expectations of the local communities.
Yeah, because how important is it when you come up with a project of this magnitude? How important is it to make sure that locals are brought on board from the outset?
It's imperative. It's, you know, the local community sit at the very middle of this. I always talk about the triangular theory, and whether it's the oil and gas, whether it's any extractive related community, you have to show when you're having these projects that the government is playing the part, private sector are playing the part, and as well as the public sector is playing the part. When the community are left out of this, this is when we're able to see that the expectations can't be managed. And it's very disappointing for Tullow Oil, because you come in as an investor into a country, you're ready and willing, and the government gives you a buy-in and tells you all is going to be okay, but then they don't take care of their part. They do not take care of making sure that the community and the residents in Turkana are aware of what's going on and can be able to understand so. And this has happened before. We look at the Kinangop wind farm and we see how actually the government is in litigation right now because they want reparations for about $4.5 million that was brought in by outside investors because they were not able to get the community buy-in, which is, again, the role of the government.
Okay, throwing blames to people, individuals, or agencies might not be the right thing to do, but then again, it shows that someone failed, someone slept on their job. Who is it that you believe might have failed to do what is expected of them to actually let this situation actually unfold?
Transparency and accountability are not just words that should be thrown around, but are actually actions that should be taken very, very seriously. Many civil society organizations in Kenya and around the continent have been calling on the Kenyan government and Tullow Oil to reveal the PSC, the production sharing contract that is going to be able to detail out and state what are the royalties, what exactly is going to be happening with the money, how is it going to affect the people. And the lack of this and this transparency, accountability again, is now where we can start to put the blame game. When it comes to environmental social impact assessments, NEMA are the ones who are supposed to be carrying that out. They have stated they did carry this out, but from the information that has been gathered and from what I am privy to, this hasn't taken place. And if it did take place, then it didn't take place adequately because expectations cannot be managed. And when you see people in uproar talking about insecurity, talking about locals being integrated into the value chain, you're able to realize that indeed this was not done adequately at all.
You saw that story that just aired, the lady there indicating that how is it that you safely and securely transporting the crude oil from Turkana to Mombasa, and yet you can't guarantee security of the residents. So is it that insecurity is the real issue here, or insecurity is just being used as a reason to actually go up in arms?
Well, You know, this is a very slippery slope, and I will be very cautious with the words I use. However, it is very evident that insecurity is one of the things to say. And again, we also have to look at, in Kenya itself, there's about 650,000 unlicensed firearms, and most of these are in northern Kenya. So you have to understand the area we're speaking about, and we need to understand also the past. We're talking about 88% of the population there are living below the poverty line. And when you have such a high number, again, you have to manage the expectations. So beyond the insecurity, there is a lot that has to be played and has to be discussed with regards to what is happening there. A lot of the time you see local politicians can be used and have been used to be able to spur some of these complaints. However, beyond just the insecurity, there's more to it, and it shows that lack of jurisprudence was taken before engaging in this. And this has happened severally. During the clip you just showed now, Honorable John Munez was talking about that we have to make sure we do the right things to avoid this from happening in the future. But this has happened October 2017. This happened in 2015. This happened in 2012. So we have to ask ourselves clearly from the very start, when we found oil, when former President Mwai Kibaki was able to announce Kenya found oil, it has not been managed well, and they've not taken the right steps to involve the relevant stakeholders from the beginning, and that is why this is going to be a very, very bad situation. And
it's already close to a month since the unrest began.
Yes.
And it looks like there is no haste in trying to solve the situation. Is that a dangerous approach?
It is a very dangerous approach. Tullow Oil have stated now that they're giving this 2 weeks, or they might be forced to leave the operation. And that is very worrying. It should be very worrying for the government especially, because in such an instance, then what is going to happen to all the money they have invested? If you decide to invest into a project today and you are secured of certain minimums, and this is the community buy-in, and this doesn't happen, you need to recover your costs. So this needs to be dealt with very fast. And when we're talking insecurity, go across the continent to Nigeria and to the Niger Delta. What we've been able to see there, when expectations have not been able to be managed, we've seen a rise in kidnappings, we've seen a rise in insecurity, and we do not want it to get to there. But when the local community are questioning their own security, but talking about these trucks are so secure and are moving from point A to B, then there is something amiss. There is definitely something amiss.
And what is really going to happen? Let's say if Tullow, in the next fortnight, the situation does not change and they decide to wrap up, what's going to happen? They're already in the process of transporting the crude oil from Turkana to the coastal city of Mombasa. Then what happens?
Then the indemnity will have to fall on someone, and this is going to have to be litigated at an international court, most probably the International Court of Justice, to be able to understand then where does the blame fall. We don't want it to get to that point, but this has to be dealt with very urgently. And again, I do not blame the local residents of Turkana, and I think again this is where the government has unfortunately failed. They needed to ensure that we're taking care of the Kenyan citizens. This is the local community's area, and this is where a lot of people have been displaced, to make sure that these operations are taking place. And when you see these trucks and you see them moving and you hear about the percentages and how much money is going to be coming, you need to manage the expectations. When you hear people screaming in uproar, the money should come into our accounts, where was the educational background to this?
So how best are we going to move forward? Already we do have stakeholders actually meeting. Honorable Munez indicating that they're coming up with an MOU that will ensure next time such a thing happens, people will bring their grievances on the table instead of going to the streets. So is there a better way out of this situation given the current goings on?
Well, we also have to look at it from a legal standpoint. The petroleum bill has been stuck in Parliament since February. And so what we're discussing here, really we're saying is the early oil pilot scheme is taking place with really no legal jurisprudence and no legality, because this bill has not been passed. And so if the government cannot be able again to solve this within the Parliament and make sure that from this angle and from this arm, this is passed, then we're going to be having, again, another issue. I completely disagree with the Band-Aid effect, where you plaster a hole in a pipe and soon enough the water pressure will be too high and it will fall off again. We need to make sure proper environmental social impact assessments are taken and the local community understand what exactly is going to be going on, and everyone has a buy-in.
Okay, so you will hold your final thoughts in regards to that matter. We'll do one more story and then we'll come perhaps to you so that we can look. This is just touching on oil, but we have other resources and other projects that are currently going on, and these projects touch on the lives of people in those particular areas. How best can we move forward to ensure that what's happening in Turkana is not replicated in many other parts of the country? But Yokudo, who's an oil expert as well as the country manager of Springrock Energy. We do have other projects that are currently going on in the country away from oil exploration in Turkana. How best as a country can we ensure that we don't have situations like those unfolding in Turkana when it comes to dealing with these other projects?
It's very important that the government really starts to build a very strong task force within the Ministry of Energy, within the relevant industries and ministries, to ensure that when we have these projects and prior to them, we do carry out the necessary steps. You know, for example, we look at the pipeline that we were supposed to be doing with Uganda, and how we lost that was because the costs were too high. And some of the costs that were too high was because the compensation for land in Kenya, because a lot of the people have been able to capitalize and use the back end to understand what's happening and increase these costs. So if Kenya doesn't start to get serious and start putting a lot of task force and a lot of energy in making sure that prior to even the investment climate, we need to ensure that we are managing our people very well, we are managing the costs very well, because we are going to keep losing out. And if we do not do this as soon as possible, this is just going to be one in the many, as we have seen in the past.
And do locals sometimes actually have too much expectation? Is there a threshold? Is there like a limitation where we can say these are the, we can have benefits up to this much and not as much as perhaps some of those people might be demanding? Is it also proper for locals to actually know that it can only go this far?
Absolutely, but who is to educate them about that? The local people need to be educated. You cannot tell, for example, you cannot tell a child that this and this will happen to this extent if you've never taught them. The locals need to be given this education. You need to make sure that you do set up in the community and you're having these stakeholders communication with the people, and you have relevant people who represent all parts of society. So we're talking from women, we're talking to industry workers, we're talking to health workers, we're talking about every single stakeholder that plays part in this, because when there is a genuine understanding, then you're able to ensure that people understand to what benefit and to what maximum or minimum they should expect things. But when you circumvent this and you go in different directions, then you will see this happen over and over again. So yes, unfortunately, the blame is on the government.
As we wind up, we have Tullow, which is a global firm, okay, a multinational. Again, it's here saying that the situation might not be very good for us to stay more than 2 weeks from now. What sort of damage does that do to a country that expects to attract a lot of international investments?
It's very, very damaging. It is very damaging, because what that speaks out and what that says to investors who are looking at Kenya and want to be able to come and take part in business here is, it's not safe. You can invest thousands and millions of dollars and may not have returns. So this has happened again, as I said, in Kinangop. This is happening in the Lake Turkana wind farm, where again, the government has not been able to foresee its part and make sure it takes the right steps to ensure to production point and to the point when we are generating this energy that everything has been taken care of, then we are going to continue having these issues.